This is Andrew, and this is Keen On, the daily now.tv chat show with some of the world's leading thinkers and writers. Hello, everybody. It is Thursday, August the 10th, 2023. We're still living in the aftermath of the brawl in Montgomery, Alabama. The police now are investigating it, all the people involved, which was widely reported on social media, became an astonishing meme of its own. Lots of talk about Black Twitter, according to NPR, jumping to life, all sorts of very funny images of people carrying folding chairs like holstered weapons and all sorts of other memes, one including a photoshopped image of Martin Luther King statue holding a folding chair. So a degree of amusement, but of course also political seriousness all about this. Meanwhile, a lot of people are talking about the twilight of Black Twitter and perhaps the Montgomery brawl as evidence of that. A lot of people, and there was a Washington Post piece earlier this week suggesting that Black Twitter is fleeing Elon Musk's X, which of course has been renamed X. One man who has given a lot of thought to this is my guest today. He's a very distinguished writer. He teaches at the University of Maryland. He's the author of a couple of very well-received books, and also very active on Twitter. He was rather active actually after the Maryland brawl. One funny tweet he wrote immediately after, he showed the image of the guy swimming to the fight, and he wrote, "The brother can't even swim. The ancestors were moving his arms and legs." His name is Rion Amilcar Scott, and he's joining us from Annapolis in Maryland. Rion, that was a very funny tweet. Tell me a little bit more about your use of Black Twitter. I mean, are you consciously using it? Do you think it's even a term that people should use?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing. I mean, I think there are definitely Twitter spaces that people tweet into. I think there's Black Twitter. I think there's literary Twitter. Those are two places where I find myself active on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, Black Twitter is a place for a lot of really smart analysis and a lot of hilarious jokes. So yeah. I mean, I do think it's a thing.
Do you remember the first time you heard the term Black Twitter?
No, I don't think so. I think my first reaction to it weren't necessarily positive. Because it was there are a lot of pylons on Twitter. That's one thing. I think it's not possible to be on Twitter without having at some point engaged in a pylon. And
what is a pylon?
Well, I think when someone says something or does something stupid or foolish, and a lot of people jump up and join in the mockery or the admonition, and I think probably one of my first first times hearing the phrase was during those pylons, or one of those pylons. And I don't think it's Black Twitter is a space that is uniquely
yeah, that's for sure. So you first joined in what do you remember the year you joined? It doesn't actually. Oh, you joined in October 2009. So you've been on for a while.
Yeah. I joined. I didn't really understand Twitter at first. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it was a thing you had to sort of play around with it first. And there've been a lot of different phases on Twitter. And what made me sort of get into it was I started using it as a writing exercise. I realized that writing a joke in that small space of 140 characters was very similar to writing a good sentence. So every day I would write, I would try to write a good sentence that doubled as a joke in that space, and it made my writing a lot better.
2009, of course, Barack Obama was president. Very different kind of America, wasn't it, Rion?
Yes, a very different time. I think there was a lot more hope at that time.
Hope in what sense? I mean, as an African American, or just more broadly?
I think both. I think there, at that time we still had the feeling of the fresh feeling of the Obama presidency, um, and yeah, and it didn't seem as dark. I don't think the term fascism was thrown around as much at that time.
You're, as I said at the beginning, you're the author of a couple of very well-received collections of short stories, Insurrections, which I think came out in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and your latest book, The World Doesn't Require You, won all sorts of awards, a finalist for the Stein Book Award, the Penn Award, very distinguished. You noted earlier that writing for you on Twitter was like writing regularly. Do you spend a lot of time? And for example, that tweet about the brother not swimming, did you spend a lot of time thinking about that, or does it just sort of come to you and you just throw it in?
Yeah, that one sort of came to me. I thought that was a funny idea. And I kind of put it out there. Sometimes I spend a lot of time crafting and thinking about it. Not so much anymore. After Twitter became more than 140 characters, it lost that writing exercise quality for me.
Do you remember when that was, when they lost its 140 character?
I don't remember exactly.
But what difference would that make to you? I mean, you can still work within those confines if you choose to.
You can, but it just but they removed the character count. So they're sort of pushing you to write past that. It was hard to figure out exactly when you hit that 140, and I just didn't have the energy to try to sit down and count characters every single time.
What are your rules in terms of what you do and don't say? You have one photo, a recent one, pinned actually, of you and your son in the car. Your son reading me a short story he's working on. Do you feel that everything is fair to reveal about oneself on Twitter? Are you concerned in any way about the challenges to privacy, both for yourself and for others?
Yeah, I mean, I of course, I don't think everything is fair game. There's some thoughts that you let go. Embarrassing moments with my children. I don't put on there. I don't want to embarrass them too much. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have any hard and fast rules. It's just if it doesn't feel right, I don't put it up.
The Washington Post talks about Black Twitter being empowering and quoting, as a result, Black voices were elevated in a way that felt new. A lot of it, of course, stems from various kinds of injustices. The shooting of Trayvon Martin in 2012 and Michael Brown in 2014. Do you remember those days on Twitter?
I do. Rion? I do, particularly Michael Brown and Eric Garner. It was a place for a lot of catharsis, a lot of witnessing, a lot of figuring out what's happening. Figuring out who the voices to pay attention to. It was a really important tool for that sort of thing.
Do you remember the Brown experience, where you were and what you tweeted and who you read?
I don't know if I remember in that specific. I don't remember exactly what I tweeted. A lot of it was like frustration, rage. Learning that they left his body out in the street. The lack of care. I don't remember exactly. I remember at that time we were following a lot of voices who are on the ground in Ferguson and listening to what they had to say, particularly local voices. Then there were people who weren't necessarily local who became well known, who at the time seemed to be important voices.
And what about the Floyd experience in 2020, of course, which seemed to strengthen Black Lives Matter? Was that an important moment for Black Twitter?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was just another moment where a lot of things were sort of sort of galvanized. We was again sort of figuring out what voices to listen to and learning information quickly. And trying to trying to figure out what we can do and how we can be how we can be a part of things, what we can say. Yeah, I think at that point it was kind of like it becomes like Groundhog Day a lot of times with a lot of these injustices. A lot of times, I kind of pull back from paying attention, paying very very close attention for my own mental health. With George Floyd, I couldn't pull back. It was a situation where it was just so big, and we were all inside, and it was something that I decided I'm gonna pay attention to because this seems very important, and it was.
What was the impact on your mental health, or what were you fearful of?
Well, the fearful thing is that there was a moment in time when a lot of these you hear these situations in which the police are killing Black people, particularly Black men, over and over and over and over again, and it's kind of like is this gonna stop at some point? And and the answer was often no. And there was and there's images. A lot of times there are these images, and I don't think that it is good for anyone's mental health to continuously watching death over and over and over and over again. You hear these horrifying screams. You see these people who had all this potential and hope. It's a lot of times as a person, as a Black person, I had to pull back and not pay close attention to some instances.
Do you or were you consuming your news on Twitter? Did you use it as a combination of the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the New York Times, or did you also have, or do you have, news sources that you rely on?
Oh man, I think I definitely have news sources I rely on. But a lot of times, I follow those news sources on Twitter, and that's I don't think Twitter is ever my quote unquote news source. I might follow Washington Post or someone or a journalist on Twitter and follow up, click on their links and follow up for later analysis. But I'm a former journalist, so it's always important to me to be reading newspapers and actually following the news through reporters.
As a former journalist, as a teacher of creative writing, as a distinguished author of a couple of collected short stories, a couple of books of collected short stories, what's your sense of people watching death on repeat, these highlights, these, I guess, memes? How do you think that changes us? What's been the impact on mental health broadly? A lot of mental health professionals suggest that after about 2012, America became collectively a dramatically more anxious society. Do you think that's connected with social media broadly?
I mean, that's really, really hard to say. I don't know if I'm in a position to say authoritatively whether or not social media made us more anxious. I can say personally that there are times when I have to pull back on using it, moderate who I'm following, and a lot of times there are people who will seem like good sources, and you find out over time that they're really fear mongering or grifting. A lot of times, people are using these images to raise money and big themselves up, and you really have to be aware. Not every voice is a good voice. A lot of times people come on there with great intentions, and the fame, moderate as it is, of social media, seems to corrupt them.
Who for you were the stars, or maybe still are the stars of Black Twitter? The people who you followed, who you would enjoy reading?
Oh man, that's kind of hard to say. Stars of Black Twitter. I think a lot of literary voices. There's the Roxanne Gay. It's always important to me to follow. Still.
Why?
She's a very good writer and very insightful. And funny and hilarious. There was a time when there was a lot of a lot of vitriol coming her way, and she handled it like a champ. Clapbacks were epic. And yeah, and it shifts over time. It's hard to say. I don't think there's there are a lot of funny voices. I'm trying to think. A lot of that is popping out of my head right now. But yeah, it really does shift over time. I'm not sure if Twitter, the way it's fragmented as it is now. I don't know if there's anyone that I'm consistently looking towards, because everyone's kind of disappearing.
Yeah, speaking of disappearing, according to the Post, 67% of Black Americans have left Twitter.
Wow.
You're still on it. I mean, that's an astonishing number. That's like almost 7 out of 10.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Engagement is way down. You tweet something and it just goes into into the ether, and you look at the numbers, and not a lot of people are seeing the tweets. At least that's my experience. I don't know if I've just gotten significantly worse at Twitter, but I suspect it has a lot to do with
when you say worse at Twitter, you mean not getting the response?
Yeah, a lot. Even that tweet that you mentioned got a more response on Blue Sky than it did on Twitter.
Yeah, and speaking of Blue Sky, lots of alternative channels. I mean, Facebook or Instagram have just released Threads. There are Web3 style decentralized platforms like Blue Sky. Are they for real, Rion, do you think? Or are they just speculative, promising platforms that will never actually result in anything?
Yeah, it's so hard to say. I think every time these things pop up, there's all this excitement. And everyone's trying to rebuild a certain era of Twitter. Certain pre-Musk eras of Twitter on different platforms, and so far it hasn't really popped up. I think one of the problems, X started before it was ready. It was just there were just a lot of features that just weren't there, and they sort of adding the features, but a lot of people have already fled. Mm-hmm. Blue Sky is cool, but it's just there's just something that's not there. Twitter had a particular magic, and it's hard to explain exactly what that magic was. So subsequently, it's hard to recreate it.
Yeah, like Oakland, perhaps. There's no there in Blue Sky. Do you remember where you were when Musk acquired Twitter? Did you realize that that was the end of it, really?
I just, I had just hoped that it wasn't, that he wasn't actually going to do it. He's such a bullshitter. He says he makes these promises that a lot of times don't come to fruition. And he overpromises and underdelivers. And there was a situation in which he wasn't he pulled back on purchasing because he realized he was in over his head. Then he was forced to purchase, and I was really hoping that the whole deal was going to fall through because I knew that it wasn't going to be a good thing. He doesn't seem to understand the platform. No one is really interested in everything that happened in this country, and and he makes himself the main character every day. And it's his tweets are horrifically bad or they're stolen. Yeah, I was very disappointed when it actually went down.
It's perhaps no coincidence. He's not just the owner of this very powerful platform, very popular platform, or formerly popular platform, but he's also the product of it, that narcissism, that self-centered, willful, parochial way of thinking about everything.
Yeah, I would say that's a good analysis.
Do you remember where you were on January 6th? Some people have suggested that what the right-wing conservatives, pro-Trump people are doing on social media isn't dramatically different from the Black Lives Matter, Black Twitter initiatives. Is there any truth in that, or are they fundamentally different?
No, it's fundamentally different. Black Lives Matter never tried to overthrow a government. There were riots in the streets. Yes, those riots were all because of something and they weren't because of Twitter, or because of Black Twitter. They were all, something. They were all because of police killings. Let's be real. And that happened before Twitter. As well. Race riots in this country are a tradition. Insurrections is not a tradition. It was a shocking moment, and a shameful moment, because it all started because of conspiracy theories and lies.
You wrote about the recent brawl in Montgomery in terms of the Twitter explosion, or the social media explosion. This is the most incredible meme apocalypse since Will smacked Chris. Hats off to everyone involved. And of course, the joke on the hats off is that the guy who had been bullied threw his hat in the air and then got involved in the fighting, the inspector, or the official guy who was bullied, who provoked the whole thing. Does this change anything? I mean, clearly something's changing in Montgomery, Alabama. Clearly race relations in some ways are changing in this country, and in some ways perhaps are no different from what they've been in the last 200 years. Does a meme apocalypse, or what you call a meme apocalypse, Rion, does it change American society, politics, culture, or will simply people move on to the next thing next week and completely forget about this particular meme apocalypse?
Yeah, we're so, our culture is, a culture that just kind of forgets about things and moves on. We're sort of still inside this meme apocalypse, so it's hard to say. At the very least, it's a moment of catharsis. But black people, we take a lot of losses in this. In this way, a lot of times, our hashtags are are people dying because of racist violence. And in this instance, it was not a celebration of violence. It's a celebration of
resistance, of the guy standing up for himself, basically.
Of resistance, and not even just the guy standing up for himself, but the unity. People that he didn't even know, came and started helping, and no one was killed. And what makes it so funny is it's just there's a lot of absurdity. And we can witness the absurdity. The guy throwing the hat, the guy swimming across the river. That absurdity, we recognize it.
Yeah, and as you say, the brother can't even swim. The ancestors were moving his arms and legs. I think that was very well put, very poetic. I want to thank you so much, Rion. Fascinating conversation. And I also Want to remind our viewers and listeners that, that the Keen On Show now is sponsored by Liberties, a quarterly journal of culture and politics, an excellently original collection published 4 times a year. And all our guests, including Rion Amilcar Scott, will receive free annual subscription. So, Rion, hopefully it's been worth your while appearing on the show on Keen On, just so that you get a good read. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.